The sky was melting into shades of amber when Coleman Briggs sat back in his chair, boots hooked over the porch rail, eyes fixed on the dying sun sliding behind the ridge. Out here, miles from any road, he'd learned to expect no one, and liked it that way. But peace in the west never lasted long. A shape broke through the dust, thin, stumbling and scared half to death. A boy, barely 13, face smeared with dirt and fear so sharp it looked carved in stone. Coleman's hand went straight to the rifle resting by the door. The boy stopped at the steps, chest heaving, trying to form words that wouldn't come. Coleman stood, chair groaning behind him. "Easy," he said quietly, voice even and calm. "You hurt?" The boy shook his head, but his knees buckled. He caught the railing, knuckles pale. "Sir, if they come, hide my sister." Coleman's jaw tightened. He stepped down from the porch, his shadow stretching long across the dust. "Who's coming?" The boy looked back toward the dark line of pines. "Please," he gasped. "She's in the trees. I told her to wait, but..." His breath hitched. "They'll kill her if they find her." That was all Coleman needed. He moved past the boy, scanning the horizon, the smell of smoke in the wind, faint but real. Trouble wasn't far. "How many?" he asked. "4, maybe 5, the boy whispered. "They burned our house, killed my pa, my ma." His voice cracked. "They said we stole something." "We didn't." Coleman's fingers curled at his side. He'd heard that story too many times. Men with power and no conscience, riding through towns like they owned the land and the people on it. Badges or no badges, it made no difference. "Your sister," Coleman said. "Where exactly?" The boy pointed to the cottonwoods near the creek. "She's little, 8. Told her to stay quiet." Coleman studied him, blood soaking through the boy's torn shirt, face pale beneath grime, but his eyes steady now. "What's your name?" "Ethan." "All right, Ethan, stay here. Don't move." Coleman grabbed his rifle and started toward the trees. Slow, careful steps. The kind a man learns after years in places where sound can get you killed. He found the girl right where Ethan said she'd be, curled beneath the branches, knees hugged tight to her chest, her dark hair tangled, dress torn. When she saw him, she flinched. "It's all right," Coleman said softly, crouching low. "Your brother sent me." She didn't speak, just stared with wide, tear-glassy eyes. "My name's Coleman," he went on gently. "I'm here to take you somewhere safe. But you need to come with me, now." She hesitated, then gave a small nod. Coleman offered his hand. Her fingers were tiny, cold, trembling in his rough palm. He led her back toward the cabin, keeping himself between her and the open land. Ethan was still on the porch, barely upright, leaning against the post. When he saw her, his face crumpled. "Lizzie," he breathed. The girl ran to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. He winced but held her close. Coleman climbed the steps, eyes on the horizon. The sun was sinking fast, just a sliver of gold left behind the mountains. Darkness was coming, and darkness meant danger. "They know you came this way?" he asked. Ethan nodded. "We ran, but they're fast." "They don't stop." Coleman looked at the two of them, scared, broken, clinging to each other, and felt something stir deep inside. Something he thought he'd buried long ago, after the war, after all he'd seen, the part of him that still couldn't turn his back on the helpless. "Inside," he said firmly. Ethan hesitated. "Sir, if they come." "They're coming," Coleman cut him off. "Now go, stay low." Away from the windows. He waited until they were inside, then turned back toward the road. The wind had changed, carrying the low thump of hooves, still distant. But closing in, Coleman checked his rifle. 6 rounds. He had more inside, but 6 would have to do. He walked to the edge of the yard, planted his boots in the dirt, and waited. The sound grew. Hooves, leather, laughter. 5 riders bled out of the dusk like ghosts. They spread wide, slow and easy. Men who'd hunted before, men who enjoyed it. The one in the center rode a black gelding, tall, mean-eyed. A long duster flapped behind him. Gun belt riding low. His hat shadowed his face. But Coleman saw the hard set of his jaw. They stopped 20 yards out. The leader spoke first, voice smooth like oil. "Evening." "Hell of a night for a ride." Coleman said nothing. "You live here?" the man asked. "I do." "Alone?" "That's my business." A smirk tugged at the man's mouth. Fair enough. We're looking for a couple kids, a boy and a girl. You seen anyone come by? Coleman's finger hovered near the trigger, but he didn't answer. The only sound between them was the wind, and the creak of saddles waiting for what came next. The man's grin vanished. He leaned forward, hands on the saddle horn. Now listen, he said, slow and flat. I'll ask you once more. Think real hard before you lie. Lying to me is a bad choice. Coleman shifted his weight but didn't flinch. I said no. A thin rider with a long scar spat in the dust. He's lying, Garrett. You can see it. Garrett raised a hand. Easy. He looked at Coleman, his face hard. Those kids took something from us. I don't expect you to know the details. What I need you to know is this. We're taking them back. One way or another. They stole nothing, Coleman said, voice steady. And they're not going with you. Silence hung heavy. The leader's horse stamped. A coyote howled far off. Then Garrett laughed, a low, ugly sound. You want to die, old man? He sneered. You're old enough to know better than to hand kids over. The scarred man's hand drifted toward his holster. Garrett shot him a look and cut him off. Don't, he warned. This ain't your fight. Coleman thought for a beat that maybe Garrett would ride off. For a moment it seemed possible. Then Garrett's face changed, calm and cold. Fine, he said quietly. Have it your way. He turned his horse and signaled the others. They peeled back into the twilight and vanished down the road. Coleman stood until the hoofbeats died away. Only then did he move, head full of plans for what was coming next. Inside, Ethan and Lizzie huddled near the far wall. Ethan had his arm around his sister. Both looked up when Coleman stepped in. They're gone, Coleman said. Ethan did not look relieved. For now, he whispered. For now, Coleman repeated. He set the rifle down and eased the curtain aside a crack to peer out. The land showed no movement, but the quiet felt wrong, heavy, waiting. They'll be back, Ethan said. They always come back. Coleman let the curtain fall. Why didn't you give them up? He asked. The boy's voice was raw. You don't even know us. You don't owe us nothing. Coleman walked over and crouched so he could meet Ethan's eyes. You're right, he said. I don't owe you, but I know what men like that do. I know what happens to kids when no one stands in the way. Ethan's jaw trembled. My pa tried to stop them. They killed him, Coleman swallowed. I'm not your pa, Ethan said, voice small. Then what are you? Ethan asked. Coleman had no answer that would make sense. So he put a hand on the boy's shoulder, careful not to touch the wound. Right now, he said, I'm the man standing between you and them. That's enough. Lizzie, who had been quiet, lifted her face. Her eyes were red but fierce. Are you going to fight them? She asked. Coleman held her gaze. Yes. Are you going to win? He didn't lie. I don't know. She nodded slowly, accepting that for now. Ethan, near breaking, blurted, I can help. I can shoot. I'm not good, but no, Coleman said, firmer this time. You stay with your sister. Keep her safe. That's your job. Ethan clenched his fists but didn't argue. Coleman moved back to the window, scanning the dark. Garrett and his men were out there, waiting and planning. When they returned, it would not be to talk. Get some water, Coleman said without turning. Find whatever food you can. It'll be a long night. He heard Ethan help Lizzie up behind him. But his mind was already far from the cabin, on the shapes he couldn't see, on the violence he knew was coming, on the choice he'd made. Shortly after midnight, Coleman saw a faint orange glow on the horizon. At first it was no larger than a lantern, then it spread. Smoke rose. The fire grew like a wound opening. He had been awake all night with the rifle across his lap, watching. Now the flames climbed and his jaw tightened. They were burning the fields, a tactic to force people out. Ethan stirred. He'd dozed against the wall. Lizzie lay with her head on his knee. He sat up, blinking, and then noticed the light. No, he whispered. Coleman had already slipped out the back door, closing it soft behind him. The night air hit him, thick with smoke and bitter. The crackle of fire grew louder. The blaze wasn't at the house yet, but it would be. They were driving it toward him, using the wind. Smart, ruthless, effective. Coleman circled the side of the house low, checking the tree line. Flames threw moving shadows. In those shadows, 3 riders moved slow and deliberate, like men shepherding the fire. He raised the rifle, sighted the nearest man. About 50 yards, possible but hard in the dark. He breathed out to steady his aim. A voice cut the night. You can still walk away from this. Coleman froze. The voice came from his left, nearer than it should have been. He turned. Garrett stood at the yard's edge, gun held but pointed to the ground. How'd you get that close? Coleman asked, flat. Garrett smiled. I'm good at my work. The smile slid off. Last chance, friend. Give us the kids and we ride off. You never see us again. Coleman kept the rifle trained on the riders ahead. And if I don't? He asked. Garrett's answer was quiet and simple. Then you burn. Garrett's smile vanished. He leaned forward in the saddle, both hands resting on the horn. Now listen, friend, he said coldly. I'm going to ask again, and you better think before you speak. Because lying to me, that's a mistake you don't come back from. Coleman stood steady, eyes fixed. I said no, he replied simply. One of the riders, a thin man with a scar running down his cheek, spat in the dirt. He's lying, Garrett. You can see it. Garrett lifted a hand. Easy, he muttered, his tone darkening. Then to Coleman, those kids, they stole from us. I don't care what you believe, but we're taking them back, one way or another. They didn't steal anything. Coleman said evenly. And they're not leaving with you. Silence dropped heavy between them. Garrett's horse pawed at the ground. Somewhere in the hills a coyote cried. Then Garrett laughed, a deep, mean sound. You got a death wish, old man? You should know better than to stand between men like us and what's ours. The scarred man reached for his gun, but Garrett stopped him with a sharp glance. You don't know what you're getting into. Garrett warned. This isn't your fight. Coleman's eyes didn't move. It is now. For a second, Garrett seemed like he might turn back, but then his face hardened, cold as stone. All right, he said quietly. Have it your way. He turned his horse, waved for the others, and the five of them rode off into the darkness. Coleman didn't move until the hoofbeats disappeared. Then he turned and went back inside. Ethan and Lizzie were crouched on the floor, holding each other. Their faces lifted when Coleman entered. They're gone, he said. For now, Ethan answered. Coleman nodded. For now. He set the rifle down, pulled the curtain slightly, and looked outside. The land was quiet, but the kind of quiet that warned trouble. They'll come back, Ethan said. They always do. I know, Coleman replied. The boy's voice broke. Why didn't you just give us to them? You don't even know us. Coleman turned, crouched down to meet his eyes. You're right, I don't. But I know men like that, and I know what happens to kids when no one stands in their way. Ethan's jaw trembled. My pa tried to stop them. They killed him anyway. Coleman looked away, then back. I'm not your pa. Then what are you? Coleman didn't answer. He just placed a rough hand on the boy's shoulder. Right now, I'm the man standing between you and them. That's enough. Lizzie, quiet all this time, finally spoke. Are you going to fight them? Yes. Are you going to win? He didn't lie. I don't know. She nodded slowly as if that answer was enough. Ethan spoke up, voice shaking. I can help. I can shoot. No, Coleman said firmly. You stay with your sister. Keep her safe. That's your job. Ethan's fists tightened, but he didn't argue. Coleman went back to the window. The night felt alive with danger. Garrett and his men were out there waiting. Get some water, Coleman said without turning. And eat something. It's going to be a long night. The fire began near midnight. Coleman noticed it first, an orange flicker against the horizon. At first small, then growing fast, spreading wide like a wound. He'd been sitting at the window all night, rifle across his lap. Now, as the fire climbed higher, his jaw tightened. They're burning the fields, he muttered. Trying to smoke us out. Ethan stirred awake. Lizzie's head rested on his leg. He blinked, saw the glow, and whispered, No. Coleman was already moving. He slipped out the back door quietly. The air outside was thick, heavy with smoke. He could hear the crackling flames and feel their heat building. They were pushing the fire toward the cabin, using the wind. Smart. Brutal. Coleman crept low along the wall. Eyes on the tree line, flames danced across the land, throwing wild shadows. 3 riders moved among them, guiding the fire closer like shepherds with a flock. He raised his rifle, lined up a shot. About 50 yards, possible, but tough in the dark. He took a slow breath, then froze. You can still walk away from this. A voice called from his left. Coleman turned his head and saw Garrett standing by the yard. Gun low but ready. How'd you get that close? Coleman asked calmly. Garrett smirked. I'm good at what I do. That makes one of us, Coleman replied. Garrett's smirk vanished. Last chance, friend. Give us the kids and we ride out. You'll never see us again. Coleman's eyes stayed on the riders in the distance. And if I don't? Then you burn with them. The two men stared at each other through the heat and smoke. Then Coleman moved first, swung his rifle and fired. The shot hit the dirt beside Garrett, throwing up dust. Garrett flinched and dove behind the water trough. Coleman didn't wait. He ran for the cabin, reloading on the move. Gunfire erupted behind him, bullets tearing through the air, smashing wood and glass. One clipped the doorframe as he dove inside. "Stay down!" he yelled. Ethan and Lizzie were pressed against the wall, terrified but silent. Coleman crawled to the shattered window and peeked out. The fire was near now, its heat pouring in through the cracks. The riders had dismounted and were moving in on foot, using smoke as cover. He counted 4. One was missing. Coleman cursed quietly and reloaded. He had maybe 20 bullets left. "Ethan," he called. "Under the rug in my room, there's a trapdoor. You see it?" Ethan nodded. "Take your sister. Follow the tunnel to the creek. Don't stop until you reach the main road." "What about you?" Ethan asked. "I'll hold them off." "No, I'm not leaving you." "Yes, you are," Coleman barked. "Your job is to keep her alive." "That's all. Now go." Tears welled in Ethan's eyes, but he obeyed. He grabbed Lizzie's hand and pulled her toward the bedroom. Coleman turned back to the window and fired. This time his shot hit home. One of the riders dropped, screaming. The others dove for cover. Bullets shattered what glass was left. The fire reached the yard, blazing bright, the air burning to breathe. Coleman fired again, until a scream cut through the chaos. "Lizzie." He spun. In the bedroom doorway stood the 5th rider, gun pressed to Ethan's head. Lizzie sobbed on the floor. "Drop it," the man said coldly. Coleman's hands tightened on the rifle. "Let them go." "Drop it," the man repeated. "Or I'll paint the wall with his brains." For a second, no one breathed. Then Coleman slowly lowered the rifle. The man kicked it away and sneered. "Smart." Coleman stood still, hands open but ready. "You got what you came for." "Let them go." The man laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "You think this is about them? You made us look weak. That don't sit right." Coleman's voice hardened. "You're going to kill kids. Over pride? You don't know what you're talking about." "I know enough," Coleman said. "You take orders from a man who burns fields and hunts children. That's the kind of man you follow?" "Shut up." Coleman took a slow step forward. "You got kids of your own?" The man's face twisted. "I said shut up." "Maybe that's why you're shaking," Coleman said softly. "Because deep down, you know this isn't just business." The man's hand trembled. Coleman kept talking, voice low, calm. "You pull that trigger, you'll never be the same man again. I know, because I've been where you are." The man's breathing quickened. "You're lying. I'm not. And you know it." For a long moment, no one moved. The fire roared outside. Smoke rolled in thick and choking. Then, slowly, the man lowered his gun. Ethan stumbled forward. Coleman caught him and pulled him close. The rider stood frozen, then turned and walked out into the smoke. Coleman knelt beside Lizzie, checked her quickly. She was fine, shaken but alive. He pulled her close. "You're all right now." Ethan dropped beside them, shaking. "I thought—" "I know," Coleman said quietly. "But you're safe." The boy broke down, sobbing hard. Coleman wrapped an arm around both kids and held them tight. Outside, the fire still raged. Inside, something else was burning, something like hope. "Why'd you do it?" Ethan asked softly. "Why risk everything for us?" Coleman paused, then said the truth. "Because no one did it for me when I needed it. And I wasn't about to let that happen to you." Ethan looked up, tears cutting through the soot on his face. "Thank you," Coleman nodded. "Come on. We gotta move before this place comes down." He led them to the trapdoor. The tunnel was narrow and dark, but safe. He went first, lantern in hand. Ethan and Lizzie followed close, clutching his coat. They came out by the creek. Cool air hit them like freedom. Coleman turned back. His house was burning to the ground. Everything he owned, gone. But the kids were alive. That was enough. When dawn came, the sky was pale and quiet. Coleman stood by the creek, watching smoke drift from the ruins. Ethan and Lizzie sat wrapped in a blanket nearby, silent. Then came the faint sound of hooves. Coleman reached for the revolver on his hip, his last weapon. A lone rider appeared on the road. Coleman's stance eased. It was Sheriff Harlan, gray-bearded, tired eyes but kind. He stopped his horse and dismounted. "Heard the fire all the way from town," Harlan said. "Came as fast as I could." "We're all right," Coleman replied. The sheriff looked at the two children. "They with you?" Coleman nodded. "They are now?" Harlan studied him for a moment, then sighed. "Garrett gone?" Coleman looked out over the smoking land. "Yeah, gone." "He'll be back," Sheriff Harlan said quietly. "Men like him always come back." "Maybe," Coleman replied, jaw tightening. "But not here. Not for them." Harlan studied him for a moment, then raised an eyebrow. "You planning on sticking around?" Coleman looked over at Ethan and Lizzie. The boy sat close by, watching him, cautious, but with a little hope in his eyes. Lizzie was asleep against her brother's shoulder, her face soft and peaceful for the first time since he'd met her. "I don't know," Coleman said honestly. "Haven't thought that far ahead." Harlan nodded slowly. "Well, when you do, come see me. Town could use a man like you. And those kids? They're gonna need a place. They got one," Coleman said quietly. "They got me." The sheriff's face softened. "All right then." He climbed onto his horse, tipped his hat. "You need anything, you know where to find me." He rode off down the road, and Coleman turned back to the creek. The water ran clear and cold, sliding over smooth stones, not caring about the fire, the death, or the pain that had filled the night before. Coleman knelt and splashed the water on his face, washing off the soot and sweat. When he stood, Ethan was there beside him. "What now?" the boy asked. Coleman looked at him, then at the burnt land behind them. "Now we rebuild," he said. "Here, or somewhere close, doesn't matter where. A house is just wood and nails. It's the people inside that count." Ethan's throat tightened. "You really gonna keep us?" "Unless you got somewhere better to be," Coleman said. Ethan shook his head. Then, slowly, a small, real smile spread across his face. The first one Coleman had ever seen on him. It made him look younger, alive, like a kid again. "We don't got anywhere else," Ethan said quietly. "Just you." Coleman smiled faintly and put a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Then I guess we're stuck with each other." Behind them, Lizzie stirred, blinking awake. She looked around, confused at first. Then her eyes found Coleman. She didn't speak. She just reached out her tiny hand toward him. Coleman took it, and in that moment, surrounded by ashes, silence, and the ghosts of what had been, something new began. Something small, uncertain, but real. A family. Years later, the ranch sat quiet in a valley between two ridges, wrapped in cottonwoods and wildflowers. It wasn't big, just a small house, a barn, a few cattle, but it was theirs. Coleman stood on the porch, watching the sun sink behind the hills, just like he had on that night so many years ago. But this time, he wasn't alone. Out by the barn, Ethan worked beside Lizzie, showing her how to mend a saddle. Ethan had grown tall and broad, strong like a man who'd earned every scar. Lizzie was 15 now, sharp, stubborn with her mother's dark hair and her brother's fierce eyes. They argued, laughed, teased each other, but Coleman could see it. They cared deeply, and they always had each other's backs. Ethan looked up and caught Coleman watching. He smiled, raised a hand. Coleman raised his back and smiled too. The boy he once saved was a man now. Coleman's eyes softened as he thought of that night. The fire, the fear, the impossible choice. The moment he'd lowered his rifle and decided that some fights were worth taking. No matter the cost. Lizzie laughed at something Ethan said, a bright, beautiful sound that floated through the evening air. Coleman closed his eyes and let it fill him. He had lost his house that night. But he had found something better. He had found home. The sun dipped behind the ridge, painting the sky gold. A man stood on the porch of a quiet ranch, not lonely anymore. In the barn, two voices rose in laughter. The wind carried that sound across the valley, and for the first time in years, the land felt at peace.